is Liana, live from Kids in the House. Today we're going to talk about ADHD, and I am very fortunate to have 6 of the world's leading experts on ADHD with me. But I like to start with a little inspirational clip. It's really important as a parent of a child with a learning disability to keep remind them that lots of people use their ADD as their strength. And here are some examples of successful people with ADD. I grew up in Sweden with both dyslexia and ADD. School was a horrible experience for me. And it wasn't until after school that I realized that my way of thinking differently actually could be the secret of my success. When I grew up, that my parents had told me about successful people with learning disabilities. So it's a great opportunity to make your child feel like they too can be successful. I'm now going to invite with me 2 incredible experts from a great organization called Understood.org. It's a great resource, and I have with me Dr. Thomas Brown and Gail Belsky. How are you guys?
Good morning.
Terrific.
Doing well, thanks.
So I'm going to give a little more information about the 2 of you. Thomas Brown, you're a Ph.D. and a consulting psychologist for Understood. You earned your doctorate at Yale and serve as a professor of psychiatry and behavioral science at the KEX of USC. Quite a resume. And Gail Belsky is a senior editor at Understood and a former executive editor at Time Inc. You're also an author, a writer, a blogger, and most importantly, a mother of 2. So great to have both of you here. How are you today?
Terrific. Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start with you, Dr. Brown. What is the difference between ADD and ADHD?
There was a time when we used ADD to talk about people who had problems with attention, but not with hyperactivity or behavior problems, and ADHD for those who had attention problems and behavior problems. But then a few years ago, the diagnostic manual changed it so it, in a way I think didn't make much sense, saying we're going to call it all officially ADHD, but most of us, including myself, usually use ADD and ADHD interchangeably.
So Gail, who can diagnose ADHD, and how can a parent who might not have great financial resources get their kids diagnosed?
There are a number of professionals who can diagnose, including psychologists, pediatricians, neuropsychologists. The key is, no matter who is making the evaluation, that they do a full and appropriate evaluation, which Tom can really speak to. So in my case, we were referred to a neurologist by a pediatrician, a local neurologist at a hospital who took insurance, and so all we needed to do was pay a copay. It was very doable for us. And Tom hopefully can speak to some other ways of, getting low-cost evaluations.
How is it diagnosed? How do you know it's ADHD?
You don't know that you have ADHD by brain scans at this point, even those are helpful for research, but not for diagnosis, or by an expensive battery of psychological tests. What you need is a clinical interview with a professional who's trained in dealing with ADHD, who can recognize the characteristics, and how they're similar to and different from normal development and behavior. And then the process includes usually a screener, a list of questions to check it out, clinical interview to find out where the person's having trouble, where their strengths are, a normed rating scale so you can make comparisons between that person's functioning and the functioning of other people of the same age, and then a screening to be sure there's not some other learning or psychiatric problem that's making trouble instead of or in addition to the ADHD.
Because it is very common that people have more than one, right? Like if you have dyslexia.
Someone with ADHD has 6 times, as an adult, has 6 times the likelihood of having at least one other psychiatric or learning disorder on top of the ADHD.
Wow. And what are some of the symptoms that goes from severe and maybe mild that you see in a child with ADHD?
It depends upon the age of the person you're talking about. You know, the thing that we see often is with the really little kids are problems with safety. They're much more difficult to control and to protect, so they don't run out in the street or do something, jumping off something that they're going to be hurt at, or engage in some other kind of behavior like that where they can get hurt. Or often they'll be very difficult to manage their sleep. Older kids, the problems have more to do with getting along with other people in the family or getting along with other kids. And certainly when they get into school, then you run into difficulties with their being able to follow directions. They may be quite smart, but they often will have difficulty in being able to stay tuned to the things they need to do, to shift focus from one thing to another when they need to be able to manage their emotions so they don't get too carried away with frustration or give up too quickly or get too anxious. Or there may be difficulties with being able to keep one thing in mind while doing something else.
That's a good way. Gail, as a parent, should you tell other parents that your child has ADHD, or should you let your child tell their story when they're ready?
You know, I never felt like I had anything to hide, but, you know, I didn't walk around announcing it. There was no reason to do that. As my son got older, you know, I really felt it was for him to explain to his friends, his teachers, at the way he wanted to do it, because that's part of being a self-advocate, is being able to speak up, you know, in your own behalf. And as he got older, he really did that, and he did it comfortably.
I am now going to show a little video from your website that I loved. It shows how difficult it can be for an ADHD child to do homework. So here we go.
We just finished dinner and it was time for homework. He hates homework.
It makes no sense.
I don't know how he finds anything in his backpack.
I can't find my backpack.
Finally, we found his assignment. He rushed through it. I wonder if he even learned anything.
I wasn't gonna get it right, so I just wanted to get back to playing my video game. At least I'm good at that.
I couldn't even read his handwriting.
Holding the pencil makes my hand hurt.
I know he's bright.
Why is it so hard for me?
He's
I'm
just
trying
gotta
as
try a
hard
little
as
harder.
I can.
When you can see learning and attention issues from their side, you can be on their side. Go from misunderstanding to understood.org.
That is such a great clip from your website. And so, Gail, what are some of the things a parent can do to make it easier to do homework with their ADHD kids?
Well, definitely it makes it a lot easier for them if you can break it down into smaller chunks. It becomes overwhelming and organization can be a problem for them. So the smaller the chunk, the easier they can tackle it. And I also think homework breaks are kind of hugely important. And how you organize them and when you give them, I think is something you do, you know, in consultation or in together with your child. But the ability to be able to take a break, re-energize, and come back, at least in my household, was huge.
Yeah, one thing I did too with my kids is I would throw a ball back and forth when they were learning something, or jumping on the trampoline and doing homework. Worked really well for me. Dr. Brown, do you think that there is any difference in diagnosis with girls or boys? And are boys getting more diagnosed?
Boys definitely are more frequently diagnosed when you're looking at kids. The ratio for kids who are being diagnosed with ADHD is about 3 boys for every 1 girl. And what we've learned more recently, though, is that when you look at young adults and adults, the ratios of men and women with ADHD are quite similar. And what that suggests is there are a lot of girls and women out there who have these difficulties, but they're not getting identified early enough to make a difference for them. People just think they're not making that much trouble for anybody else, and maybe they're not paying much attention, but they're just a little ditzy or they don't care. And it takes a while until they get to the point where they can bring their needs to the attention of people who can help them get a diagnosis.
And do you think it's because they tend to be less hyperactive?
Less hyper and less annoying to parents and to teachers.
Gail, can you talk to us about the importance about creating a community when you have a child with ADHD or any learning disability for that matter?
Absolutely. For both parents and kids, it's essential to feel that there is a safe place where you can talk about what's happening, and people who are not judgmental, because I think a lot of parents of kids with ADHD experience a lot of judgment. And so to be able to rely on a close support network is invaluable. But I also think kids with ADHD need that too.
Are there support groups? How would you best find those resources? I know you have parent communication boards on your website, but do you have other ideas for how to build your support community?
Well, in some areas, there are already pretty great support groups, which you can go online and find. But certainly coming to understood if you don't have a great support network, you can find parents who are happy to share their strategies and offer their encouragement. So I urge people, if they don't have a community, and even if they do, or even if they're starting to form one, that there's a huge community on Understood out there for them.
And now I actually like to run another little clip from your website that I really liked.
Key takeaways. ADHD is a cluster of difficulties that involve the self-management system of the brain. ADHD is often inherited. It can run in families. All people with ADHD have a few tasks or activities that are interesting to them and that they can pay attention to very well.
That's some really interesting facts. And Dr. Brown, I always wondered, why is it that a child that has, trouble focusing also have that other quality where they're able to hyperfocus? What's up with that?
What you're asking is about the central mystery of ADHD.
Yeah.
That is, I've seen thousands of children and adults with ADHD. Every single one of them has a few things they can do where they have no trouble paying attention and focusing and working hard and remembering things, even though they have much difficulty in being able to do that for almost everything else that they're asked to do, even things they know are important. And what makes the difference, sometimes it's playing video games, sometimes it's playing a sport, sometimes it's making art or music, or taking a car engine apart when they're older and playing with Lego blocks and creating massive constructions when they're younger. But everybody I've ever seen who has this has a few things like that they can do where they have no trouble focusing, even though in almost everything else they've got a lot of trouble. And you ask them about it and you say, what's with this? How come you can do it here and you can't do it there? And usually what they'll say is it's easy. If it's something I'm interested in, I can pay attention. If not, I can't. And most people hear that and they say, yeah, right, congratulations. That's true for anybody. Anybody's going to pay attention better for something they're interested in than for something they're not, which is true. But here's the difference. People who don't have ADD, if they've got something they've got to do and they know they've got to do it and it's important, they can usually make themselves pay attention, even if it's pretty boring, just because they know they got to do it. People with ADD, it is incredibly difficult for them to be able to make themselves pay attention unless the task is something that's really interesting to them, not because somebody said to them, hey, this is important, you should pay attention to it for getting better grades, but just because it is more interesting to them for whatever reasons. or if it's something where they see the situation as one where something that they think of as very unpleasant is going to be happening very quickly if they don't take care of this right here, right now. Under those two conditions, it changes the chemistry of the brain instantly. The problem is it is not under voluntary control. And that's what makes a lot of people say, well, if you can do it here, why can't you do it there? When in fact, that's the essential nature of this problem. The brain chemistry responds well to things in which the person sees as really interesting or really scary, but they can't make it happen for other things.
And you know, I know when I grew up, I was terrible in school. And Gail, do you think it's really important to find something that your kid is good at outside school or in school, or to make them feel good about themselves when they might not be the best student?
I think it's really, really important, well, for all kids, but certainly for kids with ADHD, to really nurture and find passions and interests, because to Tom's point, certainly they have a much greater likelihood of being able to focus when they are truly engaged. But I do agree that it is just a real confidence builder and self-esteem builder to know that there are areas that you can succeed in and that are interesting and that aren't difficult, because I think it's tough for kids when they're in school to have everything be a challenge. So to find an interest that they're really passionate about, that they really love, and that they feel good about is really key.
Well, I want to thank you both for all the incredible work you do with understood.org and on other platforms. And everyone, I want to highlight again, understood.org is a great resource for a child, for a parent who has any child with a learning disability. And I'm, in closing, gonna roll a little footage from your website. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Lorena.
Here, parents can tap into the insights of experienced coaches to get practical tips for managing the everyday behavior challenges they face. From the jungle of options out there, our technology experts will customize a mix of the best websites, tools, and games to match the particular needs of a child. Parents will communicate directly with top professionals in the field and share questions and wisdom with parents going through the same things. They can even have the experience of seeing through a child's eyes to feel what it's like to have their child's learning or attention issue. In the end, this is a place where parents can learn, their children thrive, and everyone can feel understood.
I need to be understood.
I don't think anybody understood what I went through.
I want to be understood. I feel like I'm understood now.
I deserve to be understood.
You're not alone. You're understood.
Understood.org, great organization. Go and check their website out. And now I'd like to introduce Ned Hallowell, who have the most popular videos on ADHD on our site. He's a New York Times best-selling author, a word-renowned speaker, and a leading authority on ADHD. He has ADHD and dyslexia himself, just like me, and he's a father of 3 beautiful kids. I am so grateful to be here with Ned Hallowell. Thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy schedule to call in with us.
It's a pleasure.
How's your day?
I'm doing great, and I'm so pleased to reunite with you. You're a magnificent advocate and educator. It's wonderful to join you.
So why is it so important to get your child diagnosed?
When you get the right kind of help, when you strengthen those brakes, then the sky's the limit. I mean, the current CEO of AOL, Tim Armstrong, has big-time ADD, and he's very proud of it. He walks around their offices in Manhattan and say, watch out for me, I'm having an ADD day, and by that he means a really good day. He's coming up with lots of ideas. You know, and the man who founded JetBlue Airlines has it and says it's the key to success. So if you manage it properly, it's a wonderful thing to have, and really most entrepreneurs have it. It's in many ways what's made this country great are the people with ADHD. So what people need to understand, take it seriously, because if you don't, it can ruin your life. But if you get the right kind of help, it can take you to the very top. You can be supremely successful, happy, fulfilled. And most people don't understand that. You know, even the term itself, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, it's horrible. What a terrible name. I mean, we should rename it the entrepreneur's trait or creative person syndrome or something like that, not a deficit hyperactivity disorder. You know, I have it myself. I also have dyslexia, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. You know, I mean, I think people who don't have it have attention surplus disorder. You know, so managed properly, it can be a wonderful thing to have.
Yes, you know, I have both
Speaking of
dyslexia and ADD too, and
Yeah.
it can be a strength.
Yes, yes. I mean, look at Juliana. I mean, you're a great example of someone who's managed it magnificently.
What do you say to people who are very critical against medication?
Well, you know, people ask me, do you believe in Ritalin? You know, and I say it's not a religious principle. It's not a matter of believing in it. It's a matter of science. You know, I mean, if it's helpful and causes no side effects, great, use it. If it's not helpful or causes side effects, then don't use it. I mean, what could be simpler than that? And unfortunately, it gets turned into a hot button issue with all sorts of debates that really don't need to happen. People get scared away by wrong information that's published and don't get the benefits from the medication they could get. Or on the other hand, some people take it improperly and suffer side effects that they shouldn't suffer. So once again, it comes back to education, understanding, and the application of common sense.
And for some people, it can be like eyeglasses, right?
Absolutely. When it works, it is like eyeglasses. It is as life-changing as getting nearsighted diagnosed and treated with eyeglasses. It's dramatic, effective, safe, and altogether life-changing.
And out here, we have two very competitive schools, and a lot of people are critical. They say that, you know, half the school is on Ritalin or different drugs. Do you think that it's also is overprescribed, or you think that, you know, that's...
Sure. There are places where it's overprescribed and there are places where it's underprescribed. And the goal is for it to be properly prescribed. There are places where people want to use it as a performance-enhancing drug. There are places where the doctor, quote unquote, doesn't believe in it. This shouldn't happen. It should be science, and we should prescribe it when it's indicated, not prescribe it when it isn't. And we should monitor the side effects so that people only get benefit and they don't suffer side effects. You know, the question of overprescription and underprescription always comes back to education.
There is a lot of talk too about that ADHD is not being diagnosed enough with minorities, people who don't have English as a first language, and people who maybe come from a lower socioeconomic background. Do you think that that's the case, and what can be done to get those kids the support they need?
Sure, and once again, you hear the opposite argument. Some people say the minority populations, it's being overdiagnosed as a means of controlling them. You know, I think you have to take it neighborhood by neighborhood, and it really matters. You know, who are the doctors there? What is the healthcare system there? And the solution, as always, is training. There aren't that many doctors who are very well trained. Peter Jensen is leading a national effort to try to educate pediatricians, because they're doing the bulk of the work regarding the proper diagnosis and treatment of ADHD. We really need to do that so that people will get the right help. But it's such a good news story when you do get that right help, and that's what people need to understand. You know, this diagnosis is good news because the worst is over. Once you get the diagnosis, assuming that it's done properly, the worst is over. You know, your your suffering is behind you. Yes, there's work to be done. Absolutely. There's always work to be done in life. But now, if you get the eyeglasses and you can see clearly, the work becomes so much easier. Another analogy I use, it's like until you get diagnosed and treated, you're driving on square wheels. And when you suddenly get a set of round wheels, life becomes a lot easier.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us and taking the time to call in. I know you're so busy.
Well, thank you,
As
Liana.
always, you're
amazing work.
such a brilliant person. It's so great to hear all your great advice.
Well, thank you.
How many books do you have out?
I just finished number 20.
Number 20. And one of my favorite is Delivered from Distraction.
Thank
And
you. Thank
Ned,
you so
can you
much.
say your website so that people can know
Sure,
how to get hold of it?
it's drhallowell.com. And I also have a podcast called Distraction, which you can download on iTunes.
And a great newsletter if you can sign up for.
Thank you.
I
Yes,
get
just
to-
go to my website and a free newsletter comes out about once a month.
Well, thanks again for being with us, and over now. And I'm so excited to put our next panel on with incredible experts. We have Elaine, Taylor-Klaus, Jerome, Schultz, I'm saying your name the Swedish way, and Thomas Armstrong. So I'm going to start with you, Elaine. You are an author of Parenting ADHD Now, a creator of Sanity School for Parent, a management training program for parents of complex kids. And Jerome Schultz, you're a great expert at Kids in the House, first of all, but you're also a clinical neuropsychologist on the faculty of Harvard Medical School in the Department of Psychiatry and the author of Nowhere to Hide, Why Kids with ADHD and Learning Disabilities Hate School. That was me. And what we can do about it, which examines the stress, additional stress you have when you have a learning disability. It kind of compounds, right? And least but not last, Thomas Armstrong, Ph.D. You're the Executive Director of American Institute for Learning and Human Development, an award-winning author and a speaker, and you've been an educator for 40 years. Good for you. So honored to have you all here. And I'm going to start by asking maybe a little bit all of you, why do you think there's been such an increase in ADHD diagnosis? Jerome, do you want to start?
Glad to start. Thanks, Liana. I think there are three basic reasons. One is, and I've thought about this a lot, one is that we're expecting kids to do things earlier than we ever have. And as a result of that, things like having kids be able to read proficiently at the end of kindergarten, things that are developmentally inconceivable for a lot of kids. So I think there's no room for variety in a child's profile. Kids have to be very good at everything. I believe, I say it more often, I say the phrase, excellence has become the new average. This makes average behavior, average academic performance or behavior look defective or deficient, and that increases the number of kids who get identified as having attention deficit disorder. The other factor, I think, is the decline of play in our environment. The things that kids used to learn by the informal curriculum of play have been pretty much taken out of their repertoire. And so these are things that they don't know how to do well, and we see them as deficiencies. It's another reason. The third reason I see is that there's an increase in stress and anxiety in very little kids. And if you're stressed, you have difficulty focusing and paying attention, and therefore you're more likely to be diagnosed or misdiagnosed as having ADHD.
That makes so much sense, actually. We are putting too much pressure on our kids. Do you guys agree with that?
Yes, I very much agree with Dr. Schultz on that, on all three of those counts. Actually, in my book, The Myth of the ADHD Child, which is coming out in August, I detail those 3 points, and I also look at the child's lack of experience in nature is a big part of what's going on, and they're sort of glutting themselves on media. We live in a short attention span culture, and our kids have been conditioned through the high-speed, quick-paced media to process information in very quick bites. So I think that's a big problem. I think stress is a huge problem. I think also we don't let boys be boys anymore. And so many boys are the ones who are diagnosed with ADHD. And if we relaxed our expectations in the ways that Dr. Schultz has pointed out, I think our levels of ADHD diagnoses would go way down. At least I hope it would. And along with it, I would hope that the use of medications would also go down.
Elaine, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I would agree with everything they said, and I would add to it, and that's that we also know a whole lot more about the brain than we did 10 and 20 years ago. And we know a whole lot more about development and how kids develop. And so I agree with what Dr. Schultz is saying. I call it the achievement elite. And we're setting outrageously high expectations for kids and making it very difficult for them to keep up. But I also want to say that part of this increase in diagnosis is that we know more and we're able to identify better earlier. We're able to do early intervention. We're able to identify kids who are struggling, who might have in previous years come under the radar and just ultimately failed in life and in school. I know I struggled a lot. I know you probably did. I know a lot of people who did.
Yeah.
And
school was terrible.
So it's sort of a yes and. Yes, I think there's this challenge to the environment that we're living in that's stressful and requiring too much too early and taking kids out of nature. I agree with all of it. And my God, we know so much more, and what a difference that it's really able to make for our kids when we are able to identify early what's going on for them, that they're struggling, and get them the supports they need.
Well, we actually have a parent on the line that wants to ask you a question.
Hi, I have a question about my son, Devin. He's 9 years old, and he's been recently diagnosed with ADHD. And I know there's a lot of debate about whether this is hereditary or caused by environmental conditions. And admittedly, I'm a single dad, and you know, I have to work a lot, so there was a lot of times where I would just push the iPad on him, or just, you know, cable TV. And now I'm wondering, is it partially my fault? Is from him being exposed to so much screen time, has that led to him having this early ADHD?
Thank you for coming on, and you know, you seem like a great father, and I want you to know no parent is perfect. But we're going to let Thomas, Dr. Armstrong. So what do you say to this father?
Well, I really, you know, appreciate your sharing your situation with your son, and I hasten to say, no, it's not your fault, because media is a part of our culture, and just about every child participates in it. Of course, we can take measures to limit the amount of media our kids consume. I think that that's moving in the right direction. Limit the amount of violent media in particular. You mentioned whether ADHD is hereditary. Now, I don't believe in ADHD. I believe that there's hyperactivity, impulsivity, and distractibility in our kids, and much more in some kids than others. And I believe that that is heritable, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a negative, doesn't need to be a disorder, because many kids who have that diagnosis are novelty seekers, are highly creative. And I wish parents would see more the positive side of their kids' vitality and energy, and then use a lot of non-drug strategies, like lots of exercise, lots of time in nature, and less time on media.
So what do you guys think about this? Do you believe that there is not an ADD diagnosis? Jerome and Elaine, what do you think?
Well, I'll start. I do believe in the diagnosis of ADHD, but I think I sort of share the opinion that at some point, it doesn't matter what you call it. What matters is that we have kids that are struggling and families that are struggling to help their kids be successful. And so what's most important, and what I would say to this father, is here's where you are now. And, you know, whether it's environmental or genetic or both, or, you know, this is where you are, and this is what your child is struggling with. And so for you to understand what he's struggling with, impulsivity and disorganization and distraction, etc., and to help him learn to manage it, to understand it yourself well enough to help him learn to manage it. That's really what it's about. And some parents choose to use medication. Some parents choose to use exercise and nutrition to activate the brain. But you have to understand that the struggles are real for this child, and the focus is how do we help this child be as successful as he can be.
I focus less on what the condition is called, and I think this is what Elaine was getting at, than the behaviors that a child exhibits. And I think Tom is saying something that's accurate as well, in that these are developmental manifestations. Everybody does these kinds of things or has these kinds of challenges. It's really a matter of degree or severity. One of the reasons I think the name of the condition is helpful is because there are organizations, there are support networks, there are societies, parents can go to, places like Understood, who talk about attention problems or ADHD. And if you know what club you're talking about, you can get pretty good advice from some pretty intelligent people. So I think there's a beneficial reason for having the condition. I agree with what Ned said earlier about the disability and deficit and disorder. It's a very negative kind of terminology. I think we ought to look a little bit more at kids' abilities and try to strengthen those and try to help them work around the weaknesses or work through those weaknesses at the same time.
But don't you guys also think that there is a freedom in knowing what you have? I remember, for me at least, that I realized, I'm not stupid. I remember I was 6 years old. I knew right away that I couldn't read or get it like everybody else. And having a diagnosis also is it's a freedom in knowing that there is reason why you're having these problems. So what do you think about that, Dr. Armstrong?
Well, what really concerns me, maybe more than the diagnosis, is the use of medication. Way too much use of medication without adequate monitoring, quick diagnoses made by physicians who have links to drug companies who are actively, heavily marketing their product. That's why in my book, The Myth of the ADHD Child, I've got 101 non-drug strategies that parents can use so that they don't have to either get their kids on medication. In fact, there was a study last month that said over a long term, it seems that the medications aren't not efficacious, and they also stunt growth. And so I think parents should be really concerned about whether or not they want to put their kids on these medications and thinking about non-drug alternatives instead.
What do you think about that?
From my point of view, clinically, if I see kids who have been accurately diagnosed by a qualified clinician and behavioral interventions are used that try to address the weaknesses and strengths profile that I talked about earlier, and if those behavioral interventions and those human supports aren't successful, in so many cases that I've seen, medication, when properly assessed, properly diagnosed, properly administered, has such a profoundly important effect on a child's cognitive functioning, his ability to access the curriculum. I get concerned when we don't think about, I get concerned if we don't take away some of these medications after a long period of time, because we want to see what the child is like underneath the medication. I think sometimes helping a child access a curriculum by using chemicals to create what's presumably a chemical imbalance in a child's brain is an appropriate thing to do.
And do you think that there is a tendency to overprescribe them?
I don't have the statistics to support that one way or the other. I think that medication is being used with increasing frequency, and often it's used as an answer to a problem, and it's not necessarily the right answer. So I get concerned about any time a child, especially a child, is taking medication without a lot of evidence to support its continued use.
Elaine, what's your thoughts?
I guess the first is when a parent comes to me and says their child is diagnosed, my response is some variation of, great, yay, because now you know what you're dealing with, and now we can begin to work towards understanding what your child is struggling with and how to help that child be successful. So as you said earlier, the value of diagnosis is the opportunity to understand better what's going on and help the child. And as to whether it's overdiagnosed or underdiagnosed, what I can tell you is I work with parents all over the world who are dealing with this diagnosis, and all over the country. And it's not an easy diagnosis. To get to an ADHD diagnosis is quite complicated when it's done well. And it requires a lot of engagement from the parent, from teachers, from professionals. And most of the time, by the time you get to a diagnosis of ADHD, there's been struggle and problems going for a long time. It's not like you just dive onto an instant diagnosis. It's not that easy. And so usually by the time a parent gets a diagnosis, even if there's some denial or concern involved, there's also a sense of relief that they've been struggling for a long time to understand something and they're beginning to get some clarity. And that's where I think the focus is. Is there some problem with misdiagnosis or overdiagnosis or underdiagnosis? Of course, as with any disorder, that's going to be the case. But what we're dealing with here is beginning to be clear that we're looking at what's going on with the child and recognizing that we're not blaming the child for bad behaviors, but we're understanding the challenging behaviors and helping them manage it. And a child will make up a lot of things. If you do not give a child an explanation for why they are struggling with reading as a dyslexic or why they are struggling with impulsivity as a child with ADHD, then they will make up that they are crazy, they are lazy, they are stupid, they are bad. And that's not the message we want these kids to be making up for themselves. We want to help them understand themselves, and a diagnosis does that really well. And if the child is being well treated, and the parent is being well supported, if it's not the correct diagnosis, it doesn't take that long to figure that out and begin to work through and figure out what really is going on. Because a lot of issues look like executive function challenges and can look like ADHD, has been pointed out. So we do need to continue active treatment and engagement, but to throw the baby out with the bathwater doesn't really help anybody.
Thomas, in your book, you have 100 different ways to help your child, but not without medication. One of them you talk about is nutrition. What can you do with nutrition?
Well, one of the really interesting things around this is that we're starting to see studies appear around the world that see a correlation between the eating of fast food, junk food, McDonald's, that kind of thing, and hyperactive behavior. Now, that's a really easy one to deal with. Previously, in years past, people have talked about the Feingold diet and allergy-free diets, and those are rather hard to implement because you've got to eliminate all these substances and additives from food. But to eliminate fast food or to cut it way back down is something that is within the capabilities of parents, and it could have a dramatic impact on some kids. Interestingly, we haven't seen those studies come so much from the United States, where the fast food industry's corporate headquarters are, but we've seen them in several countries around the world.
I mentioned before, when I grew up, you first have the learning disability, and then you have the anxiety about that, that you're going to have a trouble. So it's sort of like a compounding effect. How can you help your child with that?
I think one of the things that's missing from this whole picture is the issue of confidence and competence. And I think one of the reasons that you have anxiety, if you have learning disability or ADHD, is because you have so many experiences not doing things well or not doing things right, and then having other people judge you about that. I think the key to success, and what I talk a lot about in my writing and my speaking, is helping kids get their feet on the ground of competence, letting them feel the joy of success and moving on from there. Kids who experience failure after failure after failure are in a state of escape. Their brains are looking for the exit sign. And unless we can give those kids a chance to do something that they can do well and own that success and take it and internalize it and then step off in a more difficult direction and hopefully one they choose a bit, then I think we're missing the entire piece here. I don't care what the diagnosis is called. I don't care about medications in this sense. I think the missing piece of this puzzle is letting kids experience success. And most kids we're talking about are living and working in an environment that continually demands that they do things that are beyond the cusp of their competence. Many of my esteemed colleagues have talked about seeing kids who are either interested or passionate in something. And when they are, they can perform better. I think that's absolutely true. But if you're not good at reading, you can't be interested in it or passionate about it. If you feel competent about it, you'll read more. That's what competent readers do.
I want to add that you have a great book that helps parents deal with that issues, and also some great videos on Kids in the House.
Parenting is not easy, and you could always use the extra help. Kids in the House has over 500 best-selling authors, doctors, and experts, all at the touch of your fingertips, providing the answers and insight when you need it.
With over 9,000 videos, if you've got a question, Kids in the House has got the answer.
Get instant access today to the premium content parents need.
Oh yeah, we shine like stars.
Be a parenting superstar today by subscribing to our premium content.
Inspire,
educate,
entertain.
Kids in the House.
Elaine, what kind of accommodations can a ADD child get in school?
So there's a large range of accommodations. It depends on many factors. It depends on whether the child has an IEP or a 504 plan. There are two different approaches to getting that kind of support. Just to explain, accommodations are designed to level the playing field, if you will, to help kids who are struggling have a fair advantage to demonstrate their knowledge and their ability to the teachers that they're working with. So accommodations can be minor, like seating in a classroom, or getting the prompts for younger children, getting a writing prompt the day before so they have a chance to think about it before they get into the classroom the next day. Or they can be more complicated arrangements for how and when homework is turned in, or extended assignments, or reductions of workload. You know, a child may be given odd numbers of problems and math assignments instead of every problem if processing speed is an issue. So there's a wide range of accommodations, and what's most important is that they have to be individualized, that each child needs to have the accommodations that are based on how their challenges show up for them, because it shows up very differently for different children. And some children may struggle with emotional intensity, while other children are struggling with prioritizing and sequencing. And so based on how the executive function challenges show up for them, the accommodations need to be designed for what will help them be most successful.
Thomas, what are some of the other things a parent can do? I know you have 100 tips in your book, but what are some of the top tips, or maybe the top tips?
You had mentioned anxiety as an important issue, and I think that stress reduction is really important for kids these days. So I actually have quite a number of stress reduction strategies in the book, including helping a child visualize a peaceful scene, using yoga to help kids relax. Exercise is one of the best things we can do. There's so much evidence now linking exercise to a lessening of ADHD symptoms. And we can really, encourage our children, as Dr. Schultz has pointed out, to play more often. We're losing our kids to the media, and open-ended play is really the factor that we need to have in our schools as well as in the home. So I think that we can also teach kids self-monitoring strategies so that they can notice when they're off task in certain things. We can help kids build resilience in them, help them to meet challenges and not simply blame other people or blame it on the fact that they are ADHD. In fact, there's something called a growth mindset that Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck has talked about, which is the belief that if you work hard, you can succeed. And that's opposed to a fixed mindset, which is the belief that, well, I'm ADHD, or I just don't have it in life. I wasn't born with the right genes. We've got to change that mindset in our kids. And so I've got strategies for helping parents do that as well.
That's a very good point. But Jerome, what do you do when you have a kid? How do you keep that self-confidence? If they're in 5th grade and they're reading on a 2nd grade level, how do you be honest about it and still install self-confidence?
Leanna, I think honesty is the key word, and you used it appropriately here and in a good context. If we say to a child who's in fifth grade chronologically and reading on the second grade level, if we say to that child, hey, you're really doing a good job reading, we're lying, that child knows we're lying. It's much better to say to a child, you have a condition called dyslexia. You're a member of a very large club filled with a lot of very competent people who don't happen to read very well. Or a club called ADHD, where you have a lot of competent people who aren't able to focus and sustain their attention when they want to. And there are things we can do about this. But if you're reading now at second grade level, we think that you have demonstrated to us that you've been able to improve your reading by 6 months over the past year. That's taken you hard work and a lot of time. And because you have the ability to do it, we're going to put our trust in you, and you need to trust yourself that you're going to be better at this skill over time. But it's not going to happen quickly, but it's going to happen. We can show you adults who've traveled this journey, who've worked hard like you're working, and who do better because of it. They still may not be great readers, or paying attention may be a difficult challenge for them, but they're highly competent and confident people. We have to be honest with kids, and we have to say to them, not only do I believe in you, but we have to get kids to the point where they believe in themselves. If they don't, they're looking again for that exit sign and trying to get out of a stressful situation over which they have little or no control.
Thank you so much, all of you, for being here today and sharing your incredible wisdom. I would love it, I know Elaine and Jerome is on Kids in the House, but can you also just go around and tell the audience how they can reach you, your website? Thomas Armstrong, do you want to start? How can people get a hold of you? I know you're coming out with a new book very soon.
Yes, The Myth of the ADHD Child, 101 Ways to Improve Your Child's Behavior and Attention Span Without Drugs, Labels, or Coercion. You can reach me at my website, which is www.institute4learning.com, institute4learning.com. And my Twitter handle is Dr.Dr_Armstrong.
And Elaine, what's your website?
Our website is impactadhd.com. And it is a resource for parents, not on the information about ADHD as much as it's about how do you manage it? What do you do in a day-to-day situation when you're trying to minimize the meltdowns and handle the homework headaches? So it's a very strategic, direct coach approach to how you raise complex kids. It's impactadhd.com.
It's a great parent education tool, and you're a great parent educator. Jerome, where can people get a hold of you?
The easiest way to reach me is through my website, which is simply myname.com, Jerome Schultz, SCHULTZ. I'd also like to point out that the book I wrote called Nowhere to Hide has been recorded by Learning Allies. So if you or your child are dyslexic, you can listen to the book and you don't have to worry about the print. I recently had the honor of recording the introduction to the book in my own voice, so you'll be able to get to hear my philosophy from me, which would be nice. Thanks for having me on the program, Liana.
That's what I love, books and tape. So as I was getting ready to do this show about ADHD, I was reading through some different blogs and articles, and I came across these two incredible blogs or articles from a lady named Robert Finn. I wanted to bring her in here because she made such incredible points. So I think we have her in Studio B. Are you there, Robert Finn?
I am.
Thank you for coming in. So good to have you here at Kids in the House in our Studio B.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
One thing that you wrote that I really, really love is 10 things parents of ADHD kids wish you understood. Great, and you kind of have to go and read this from top to bottom. I'm going to read one thing out of it. Every day the teacher writes, this is your son talking, I should say. I hate school, he said. Why? Why? He loved to read. He was great at math, and he was super curious by nature. Every day the teacher writes my name on the board, he said, stomping his foot on the floor. He adds a million check marks. The other kid thinks I'm bad. No one knows how hard I try. And I guess he was 6 years old at the time.
Yes, yes. And I think for children who are impulsive and who are hyperactive, they can get a lot of negative messages starting at a very young age. Messages that, you don't sit still, you're too active, you shout out in class, you're too physical. And these messages come very frequently, and they come starting when they're very little. And so I think that as a parent, it's so important to protect your child's self-esteem. And that particular example where they would write the name on the board, and then every time you did something that wasn't acceptable, they put a check and a check and a check. But for a hyperactive and impulsive kid, they really need a different system. They can't be held to the same system as everybody else because they just can't do it. So they need positive feedback for the things they can do and they are excelling at. It's really important to balance all these negative comments with positive comments so that their self-esteem, their little fragile self-esteem, continues to grow and to be positive, and that they don't start to feel really down on themselves.
Such great advice, because we all tend to live up to the labels that are put on us, right?
Absolutely.
And there's more great advice in this article on Babbel.
Thank you so much.
And I'd like to close the show today with one of my favorite videos on ADHD from our site.
It's very important when you explain ADHD to a child that you use a strength-based model, a model that does not include anything dangerous, negative, upsetting. The model that I like to use, that is in fact very accurate, is the following. I'll tell a child, guess what? I have great news for you. You have an amazing brain. You've got a Ferrari engine for a brain. I'll say, you know what a Ferrari is? They say, yeah. Well, your brain's like a race car. Your brain is way powerful, and that's great. You're a champion in the making. I say, but there's one problem. You've got bicycle brakes. You can't slow down when you need to, stop when you need to. And that's really what ADHD is all about. And the kids get it. Yeah, you're right. And I say, and I'm a brake specialist. So work with me and we'll strengthen your brakes. We can't do it overnight, but over the course of years, you'll build those brakes so you'll be able to stop when you need to, slow down when you need to, and win races instead of spinning out at the curve. That's truly what ADHD is all about. It's a state of relative disinhibition. You can't inhibit incoming stimuli, hence you're distractible. You can't inhibit outgoing impulses, hence you're impulsive and hyperactive. That's race car brain with bicycle brakes. I'm a brake specialist, strengthen your brakes. Kids buy into that enthusiastically. Instead of saying, I have some deficit disorder that needs to get treated, say, I've got a race car and I need to strengthen my brakes so I can be a champion. And that's the truth.
And I think this video kind of sums up what all our experts said here today. Keep it positive, and help your child with positive role models. It's not a learning disability, it's a learning difference. Thank you so much for being with us today. Please let us know what topics you want us to cover and any problems you might have that you want us to help you with. Thanks for tuning in, and over now from Kids in the House.